wind howled across the fields, whispering secrets of the past and rustling the leaves of the old oak trees that stood like silent sentinels. Out on the horizon, a storm loomed, dark clouds rolling in, casting a heavy shadow over the land. In the heart of this vast terrain, a humble farmhouse stood, its whitewashed walls glowing dimly in the fading light. This was more than just a house, it was a sanctuary, a hard-fought home carved from the earth by sweat, tears, and determination. Old Henry the farmer had spent decades toiling under the sun, his hands roughened by the work of the fields. He woke before dawn and slept once the stars winked their silent good nights. He lived alone, but his heart was full of memories, of laughter, of the love he'd lost, and the legacy he had built. A fierce spirit bolstered his resolve, and the land pulsed with life. Crops swayed in rhythm to the beat of his labor. But he had always known that peace was fragile. On this particular evening, as twilight draped its cool arms around the farm, an unsettling sense of dread slithered into the air. A faint rumble echoed in the distance, the sound of engines cutting through the serenity. 4 figures emerged from the shadows, their silhouettes heavy with menace. They were bandits, driven by greed, their eyes glinting with a darkness that matched the gathering storm. They pulled up in a battered pickup, tires crunching over gravel like an ominous drumroll announcing trouble. Henry paused, his spade frozen midair as he squinted against the dusk. A chill of unease ran down his spine, but it wasn't the cold that gripped him. It was instinct, a primal warning echoed through the years. He straightened his back, wiping the sweat from his brow, unfazed by the unsettling disruption. This was not his first encounter with intimidation. The bandits jumped out of the truck, their leather jackets whispering of danger. They sauntered towards the farmhouse with a swagger, confidence laced with threats and promises of fear. "Hey there, old man," one of them called, voice thick with bravado. "Heard you got some pretty good crops around here." Henry lowered his spade, the metal glinting in the dimming light. "You'll find no wealth here," he replied, his voice steady. The lead bandit's smile curled a crooked, dangerous grin. He stepped closer, pushing the boundaries of space, invading the quiet with his loud presence. "Let's not pretend, old man. We know you've got more than you let on. Hand it over and this can all end nicely." A deep silence enveloped Henry. He felt the weight of the words, a knife sliding closer to his heart. But he would not let fear claim him. Years of facing hardship had fortified him like wrought iron, unbreakable, unyielding. "I've worked too hard for what I have," he replied softly, yet firmly, his eyes steady and unwavering. The bandits exchanged glances, half-laughs escaping their lips, belittling his resolve. They had likely encountered farmers who quaked at the slightest hint of confrontation, men who folded under the pressure of threats like paper under a heavy hand. But not Henry. Fire ignited in the bandit's eyes, a flicker of anger at the unexpected stand. He stepped closer, invading Henry's space, the scent of sweat and smoke wafting toward him. He sneered, "You're just an old fool." Henry didn't flinch. He raised the spade, the weight of it feeling familiar in his calloused hands. His grip tightened. This spade has tilled the soil, fed many, and brought life into the world. In that moment, the tension coiled tighter, an invisible line drawn on the ground. It was a standoff, one born not of blind bravery but of fierce determination. This was his land, it had given him everything. To relinquish it would mean to throw away years of toil, dreams, and hope. The bandit leader, caught off guard by Henry's defiance, motioned to his crew with a nod. One of them stepped forward, a hulking figure with a scowl etched deep on his face. He took a step toward Henry, fists clenched, muscles rippling. "You should know better than to stand against us." Henry's heart raced, but he held firm. With a swift motion, he gripped the spade tighter, a hint of defiance in his eyes. "But I will not lose it today." The bandits laughed again, but the laughter was tinged with uncertainty now. They had expected a fearful farmer who would cower and plead. Henry's stance showed a man rooted deeply, like the oaks lining his fields, unyielding, not bending in the wind. Without warning, the hulking bandit lunged forward, charging like a storm. Time slowed. The air thickened as Henry pivoted on the balls of his feet, the spade swinging in a wide arc. It met the other man's shoulder with a loud crack, a sound that shattered the darkening calm. The bandit stumbled back, shock registering on his face as he cuffed his shoulder, eyes wide. The other bandits glanced momentarily at one another, surprise flashing in their eyes. Henry seized this moment. He would not let fear paralyze him. He shouted, his voice echoing over the fields, resonating with strength. "You don't know what I have fought for." The wind picked up again, swirling around them, drawing away the laughter and fear into a tempest of raw emotion. A battle not just against physical confrontation, but an ideological clash. The farmer's struggle, the unsung heroism of those who toil endlessly, finding pride in their labor. The bandits hesitated. Just for a moment, doubt crept into their hearts. They weren't facing an old man crumpled by age. They faced a fortress. They saw the spirit of generations rising within him, the ghost of every hard winter and good harvest coursing in Henry's veins, an unyielding spirit that towered above them. In the stillness that followed the storm of action, the hulking bandit stood there, adding weight to the moment. Anger burned in his eyes, but so did uncertainty. The doubt that trickled into their ranks felt palpable, an electric charge hanging in the air. Then, as fate would have it, a distant rumble echoed a sound that wasn't just thunder but the arrival of help. The sound of engines drawing near, powerful and relentless. Henry's heart raced again, but it was from the sound of hope. The county sheriff's vehicle was racing across the countryside, headlights piercing through the veil of darkening skies. The eyes of the bandits shifted, fear twisting the bravado on their faces. They realized they risked everything. They had trespassed onto land that was fiercely defended. Angry shouts filled the air, a desperate scramble as they realized their window of opportunity was swiftly closing. The leader roared, panic rising in his voice. They turned, scrambling towards the vehicle, leaving Henry standing tall, unwavering despite the odds. With one last effort, Henry called out, louder than the storm that rumbled above. "You may run now, but don't forget what true strength looks like." The bandits jumped into their pickup, tires screeching as they tore away from the scene, dust kicking up behind them, clouds swirling as they fled into the unknown. Henry stood still, the spade still gripped firmly in his hand, watching until their dark forms vanished into the night. And as the wind subsided, a profound silence blanketed the land once more. Henry took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle within him. The storm clouds drifted, revealing a sky once more scattered with stars, the cosmos twinkling in approval. In that quiet victory, he knew he had chosen resilience over defeat, strength over fear. The bandits had underestimated not just him, but the bond woven between man and land, that sacred thread holding the fabric of existence together. And in that battle, he hadn't just defended his home, he had reaffirmed a legacy built on hope, courage, and an unwavering spirit. He turned to the fields, where the grain sighed gently in the evening breeze, the very essence of life flourishing against all odds. A smile curved his lips, a defiant, triumphant smile heralding his silent pact with the land. No storm could take what he held dear. He would fight, and even in the darkest hours, he would stand strong. The sun had barely edged over the horizon when a sharp, unexpected sound shattered the stillness. A shrill screech pierced the morning air, followed by the metallic crunch of tires digging into gravel. Down the dusty road, an old pickup truck came barreling toward the small farm, its engine roaring like an angry beast. Henry, the farmer, stood in the fields, shovel in hand, sweat already trickling down his brow from a night of restless dreams. The world around him was waking up, a palette of greens and golds stretching far and wide. But as he squinted toward the approaching vehicle, a sense of unease settled deep in his bones. This wasn't just any truck. It was an omen. Roguish figures leaned against the windows, eyes glinting with menace. As the truck came to a screeching halt, Henry dropped the shovel, letting it sink into the earth like an anchor of responsibility. The 5 men that jumped out were not the sort to come looking for friendly conversation. They wore leather jackets, and bandanas hung from their necks like trophies of battles long won. The leader shouted, swaggering forward with the kind of confidence that usually radiated from men with nothing to lose. "You got a nice little place here." Henry planted his feet firm in the rich soil, an unwavering oak standing tall against the storm. "I grow my crops with hard work. he replied, his voice steady, but deep within, his heart pounded. Laughter erupted from the group, crude and mocking, reverberating through the silence of the morning. The leader sneered, stepping closer, invading Henry's space with a bravado that clashed against the quiet strength of a man who had spent his life laboring under the weight of the sun. Henry did not back down. "You might find it's heavier than you think," he said, a low growl of defiance threading through his words. The men exchanged curious glances, surprised by the old farmer's unfaltering stance. Then, with a wave of his hand, the leader signaled his crew. They began to fan out, circling around Henry like wolves assessing their prey. They were used to intimidating farmers, breaking spirits, and demanding respect through fear. But Henry wasn't just some nameless face. He was the very spirit of the land, its heartbeat resonating through every groove in his weathered hands. "Let's make this easier," the leader said, stepping in closer, his breath hot and filled with the scent of smoke. "You've got crops worth stealing." A flicker of panic tugged at the edges of Henry's mind, but he refused to let it overwhelm him. He thought of the years spent nurturing each row, the late nights spent watching over the fields like a guardian, and the generations that had fought before him to keep this land thriving. "Take one thing from me, and I promise you'll regret it," he said, the words coming out with surprising weight, saturating the air with fierce conviction. The leader's composure wavered, just for a heartbeat. "You think you can take on 5 men?" With a calmness that belied the chaos swirling in his heart, Henry pointed to the horizon where black storm clouds were beginning to gather. "You see that? I've faced worse storms than any man can produce." What he said was true. Henry had walked through life's tempests, weathered economic downturns, droughts, and the loss of loved ones. He understood that true strength wasn't just in the muscles or bravado, but in standing firm, anchored by conviction. As if sensing both his resolution and the rising storm on the horizon, the bandits began to exchange anxious glances. It was a moment of hesitation among them, an unspoken recognition of the determination radiating from Henry. But the leader, unwilling to concede power, tightened his fists. "Enough of this nonsense." With a sudden burst of chaos, the bandits lunged. The leader rushed forward, but Henry had braced himself. He swung the shovel like it was an extension of his body, and it connected with the bandit's shoulder. A sharp crack echoed across the fields as the man stumbled back, shock lining his face. The other bandits, momentarily astounded, froze in disbelief. They hadn't expected the old farmer to hit back, much less with the force that he had. But Henry didn't stop. He moved with instinct now, weaving through the chaos, fueled by adrenaline and the sheer will to protect what was his. He shouted, his voice cutting like the cold wind beginning to whip through the fields. The bandits hesitated, and in that brief moment of uncertainty, Henry felt every fiber of his being push him forward. The hulking figure of a second bandit swung a fist toward him, but Henry ducked low, spinning on his heels. He had been quick on his feet his entire life, and the dust swirled around him as his ancestors whispered strength into his soul. The men rallied, regrouping to tackle him. But with each advance they made, Henry countered, emboldened by the echoes of his past. He thought of his father toiling the land under the bright sun. He thought of his mother, fiercely protective, her hands always in the soil, nurturing life from the earth. They had instilled unwavering courage in him, a legacy of hard work, passion, and respect for this land. Adversity wasn't simply to be faced, it was to be embraced, turned into fuel. Each swing of his shovel became a testament to that heritage. One bandit fell to the ground and the others faltered, their facade crumbling in the face of sheer determination. Each laborious breath Henry took was echoed by the strength of the earth beneath his feet, pulsating with life and tenacity. Roared the leader, his bravado dissolving faster than the dark clouds above. "This isn't worth it." Panic overshadowed his anger and he gestured frantically to his crew, but Henry wasn't finished yet. "You think you can come here, threaten my home, and walk away? No, that's not how it works." His words resonated in the air, raw and defiant, echoing into their very souls. The shadows of doubt settled over the bandits. They had not anticipated this kind of resistance. One man standing his ground was not part of their playbook. With every heartbeat, Courage surged through Henry, a force built from years of forging a life from nothing, a care for the roots that ran deep into this soil. As the first drops of rain began to fall, the leader turned on his heels, panic etched on his face. He shouted for the others, urgency wrapping around him like a vice. "Get in the truck." The bandits scrambled back to the pickup, the sounds of their hurried footsteps clashing with the growing tension of the storm. Henry watched them go, breath heavy with the weight of triumph that surged through him. As the truck roared to life and spun away in a cloud of dust, Henry felt a thrill of release ripple through him. The storm overhead matched the pounding of his heart, and rain began to fall, each drop cleansing the air, washing away fear and doubt. Standing in the midst of the turmoil, he realized his strength hadn't just protected crops, it had safeguarded a legacy. He was not merely a farmer, he was the embodiment of perseverance, a steadfast sentinel against threats that sought to exploit the vulnerable. The winds howled, a fierce reminder that life was full of storms, yet Henry stood alone in the aftermath, chest heaving with exertion, heart swelling with pride. He turned back to the fields, the lush greens illuminated by flashes of lightning that split the sky, revealing a landscape that thrived on resilience. The storm was a potent force, yet it couldn't strip away what he had fought so valiantly to protect. Rain drummed on his hat and he tipped it slightly, feeling the satisfaction of defending everything dear to him. Each drop was a salute to the land, every gust of wind a song of survival. And in that moment, as thunder rolled overhead, Henry understood that sometimes courage isn't just about facing the enemy. It's about standing for something that runs deeper than mere fear. It's about the roots that dig deep into the earth, holding fast against the strongest winds. There on that land, surrounded by the resilience of life, he cultivated more than just crops. He nurtured hope, tradition, and an unyielding spirit, a firm reminder that true strength comes not from the absence of fear, but from finding the power to stand tall when faced with danger. As the rain fell harder, washing away the threats of that day, Henry smiled. He was not alone. He was never alone. Even in the shadows, he carried the strength of all those who had come before him, and the foundation of love held him steady, stronger than the fiercest storm. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, casting a golden hue across the vast fields of corn bending gently in the morning breeze. In the early morning stillness, Henry, a seasoned farmer, stood tall at the edge of his land. His hands were worn from years of honest labor, each wrinkle telling a story of struggle and resilience. But today, that calm would shatter. The tranquility was abruptly pierced by the distant growl of engines. His heart sank as he squinted toward the road, spotting the dark silhouettes of trucks rumbling toward him. Dust billowed behind them like a sinister cloud. Henry's instincts kicked in, a warning bell ringing in his mind. The kind of men driving those trucks weren't looking for zucchini or tomatoes, they were here for trouble. The vehicles skidded to a halt, tires crunching on gravel like bones breaking underfoot. Four figures emerged, their faces obscured by shadows and the brim of their hats. They moved with the swagger of wolves, confident and predatory. One, a burly man with a crooked smile, stepped forward, eyes gleaming with intent that made Henry's pulse quicken. He shouted, a mockery of warmth in his voice. "Nice place you've got here, got a lot of crops." Henry set his jaw, planting his feet firmly in the soil he had tilled for decades. "I worked hard for what I've got." The laughter that erupted was cold, icy, void of humor. The burly man stepped closer, the rest of his crew fanning out, encircling Henry with a sense of menace. "Look, old man, let's make this simple. We're going to take what we want." Henry's heart pounded, but he refused to show fear. Each time he paused for breath, he could feel the ground beneath him resonating with the stories of his ancestors. Hardworking, stubborn folk who had built lives from nothing. To give in now would mean betraying all that history. Henry responded, keeping his voice steady, almost calm. The burly man's smile faltered but soon returned, a twisted sort of confidence rising within him. "What are you going to do?" He gestured derisively to the tool Henry held. "You might be surprised at how effective a shovel can be," Henry replied, lifting it slightly, feeling the familiar weight in his hands. This was not the first confrontation he'd faced, and it wouldn't be the last. With a fierce glint in his eye, he recalled a time in his youth when he had stood against a band of thugs, defending his family's honor and land. Back then, he had felt weak, outnumbered, but his spirit had emerged victorious. Today, he stood once more, unyielding, planted firmly like the crops he nurtured. The burly man stepped closer, invading Henry's space, the tension thickening like the air before a thunderstorm. "You're just an old fool standing in the way. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." In that moment, everything around them faded: the wind, the birds, the rustling leaves, so it was just Henry and this threat. He took a step forward, forcing the burly man to retreat slightly. "You want what's mine?" For a split second, the gang hesitated, uncertainty creeping into their bravado. They had expected a timid farmer ready to back down. Instead, they were met with a fierce spirit that ignited like a flame in the darkness. Suddenly, the burly man exploded into a fit of rage, lunging toward Henry. Instincts trained by years of hard work kicked in. Henry swung the shovel with all his might, the blade of it connecting with the man's midsection. The impact reverberated through Henry's bones, and the bandit staggered back, eyes wide with shock. Roared one of the stunned men as chaos erupted. The remaining bandits surged forward, fueled by anger and shock. Henry ducked low, narrowly avoiding a swinging fist. He spun, swinging the shovel again with the precision of a farmer who knew how to strike to protect his land. He felt alive, a rush of adrenaline coursing through him. Every swing was an echo of his sweat, hard work, and the life he had built. With each movement, he remembered the nights spent under the stars, the dreams he had woven for himself, and the legacy he wanted to protect. He felt the ground tremble beneath him. Not just the weight of boots, but the weight of generations of farmers who had stood their ground and said enough was enough. He shouted, rallying his courage as he advanced. The remaining bandits faltered, taken aback by his resolve. They had come expecting a simple heist, but were now faced with a wall built up over years of struggle. But the burly man, regaining his footing, lunged at Henry again. This time their shoulders collided, and Henry felt the intense pressure push against him. He stumbled but then steadied himself, channeling his rage into focus. Henry growled, "I've worked these fields into what they are." With sheer determination, he swung the shovel again, this time connecting with the burly man's leg. The bandit fell to the ground, clutching his knee and letting out a howl of pain that echoed through the fields. The others saw the helplessness of their leader, and the tide began to shift. Fear glimmered in their eyes now, a flickering flame of doubt. They hadn't counted on fighting someone who had nothing left to lose. Another bandit screamed, but they couldn't simply turn tail. They had made their choice, and now they had to face the consequences. As the remaining bandits scrambled away, Henry's heart raced. The adrenaline of the fight and the weight of victory mixed with the disbelief of what had unfolded. He was no longer just a farmer, he had become a protector. He yelled, his voice carrying across the fields, pouring strength into every word. The smell of the sweat on his brow mingled with the sense of freshly turned soil, intense and earthy. With the realization of their defeat, the bandits retreated, their fear overshadowing their earlier bravado. They were no match for a man who wielded not just a shovel but the irrefutable spirit of hard-earned resilience. As they sped away in their truck, tires kicking up dust clouds in their wake, Henry stood still, chest heaving. The storm clouds gathered ominously above, but he felt a surge of strength within him that banished them from his mind. He turned back to the fields, the rows of corn swaying gently in the wind, standing tall just like him. Each plant felt like a nod of approval, a testament that he had honored his land and his family heritage. The life he had nurtured would continue, unbroken and undefeated. Then the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping lightly against his worn cap. The rhythm quickened, and soon it poured, washing away the dust that marked the fierce encounter. Henry closed his eyes, letting the rain soak into his skin, feeling its cooling embrace as though the earth itself was thanking him. Henry smiled, knowing he had stood against fear, against intimidation, and emerged stronger. He realized now that every storm brings a lesson, every confrontation an opportunity to rise. With hope kindling in his heart, he looked back at the horizon. The dark clouds swirling above gave way to rays of sunlight piercing through signs of new beginnings. Each fresh drop nourished the soil, and etched within it was a promise that he would always defend what was rightfully his. As the rain washed away both the turmoil of the past moments and the fears that sought to consume him, Henry felt renewed, not merely ready to face the next challenge, but ready to stand for what he believed in, to protect his legacy like the many farmers before him who forged lives under the open sky. In the heart of every storm lies the chance for resilience, and that day, Henry proved that no matter the threats, nothing could uproot a man so deeply anchored in love for his land, his family, and his spirit. Even with bandits attempting to intimidate him, he had found power not only in his hands but in his heart, a heart that was ready to protect, to fight, and above all, to stay strong. The morning sun cast a bright golden glow over the rolling fields of Johnson Farm, each stalk of corn swaying gently in the warm breeze, whispering secrets of the earth. Henry Johnson stood at the far edge of his property, wiping the sweat from his brow as he admired his hard work. He was a man of the land, etched with years of labor and resilience, his hands calloused but sturdy, just like the soil he cherished. Today seemed like any other day. The air was filled with the familiar symphony of chirping birds and rustling leaves, but that peace shattered when the rumble of engines broke the tranquility, sending a chill down Henry's spine. 3 rugged trucks thundered down the dirt road, gravel flying behind them like a storm of warnings. Henry's heart raced as he squinted towards the approaching vehicles, instinctively sensing that something was wrong. As the trucks screeched to a halt, 4 men jumped out, their postures tense and aggressive. They were not here for pleasantries. Their leather jackets glistened under the sun, each man exuding a sense of menace that cracked the calm of the morning sky. The leader, a burly figure with a jagged scar running down his cheek, swaggered toward Henry with a smirk that twisted his lips. "Nice farm you've got here, old man," the leader called, his voice dripped with disdain. Henry straightened his back, his heart pounding harder. He knew every corner of this land. He had poured his soul into it. "This isn't a place for bandits," he said, his voice unyielding. Laughter erupted from the group, the sound sharp and mocking. Henry could see their contempt, the way they loomed forward like predators closing in on prey. "Let's not play games. Hand over what you've got and no one needs to get hurt," the leader taunted, lifting his chin defiantly. The weight of fear settled on Henry like a thick blanket, but deep inside, he felt an ember of defiance flicker to life. He had faced storms and droughts, heartbreak and loss, but he had always emerged standing. This was his land, and he wouldn't let anyone take it from him. Henry replied, taking a step forward, his feet sinking into the soft earth. "You don't know me." The bandits exchanged glances, a hint of uncertainty flickering in their eyes. They had assumed they could bully a farmer, but Henry was not just a figure of the land. He was its history, its heart. Memories of his father's struggles and his own fought-back tears surged through him, fortifying his resolve. The burly man's expression darkened. "You don't want to make this hard, old man," he spat, stepping closer. "We've got numbers." With that, he pointed to the spade resting against the wall of the barn. Henry lifted the shovel, feeling the cool metal in his grip, memories rushing back of when it had first been given to him. It was a tool of life, capable of creating and protecting. "This is more than just a tool," he declared, his voice steady, unwavering. "This symbolizes the blood, sweat, and tears of years spent in these fields." The laughter faded, replaced by an awkward stillness that hung heavily in the air. The leader, caught off guard by Henry's fierceness, furrowed his brow. "You've got guts, I'll give you that, but guts won't save you today." In a flash, chaos erupted. The burly leader lunged at Henry, fists ready to strike. In that split second, adrenaline coursed through Henry, sharpening his senses. With quick reflexes, he swung the shovel, connecting with the bandit's midsection. The impact sent shockwaves through his arms, and the man stumbled back, gasping for breath. "Get him!" he shouted, scrambling to regain his composure. The remaining bandits leapt into action, charging at Henry like wolves on the hunt. With an agility born from years of working the land, Henry ducked, sidestepped, and swung the shovel again, this time aiming for a second bandit who had closed in too fast. The blade caught the man in the leg, knocking him off balance. Fear began to seep into the hearts of the attackers. They had expected an easy mark, but now the old farmer was proving to be more than they had bargained for. Shouted one of them, his bravado crumbling like dry earth underfoot. Henry wasn't done yet. He felt empowered, channeling all the years of hardship into each swing. He was defending not just his crops, but his legacy, everything he held dear. With fierce determination, he shouted, "Get off my land!" The leader tried to rally his men. "We can take him." But there was doubt in his voice, and as Henry moved like a whirlwind, striking with precision, the momentum shifted. Suddenly, the burly bandit fell to the ground, the pain in his leg forcing him to stumble. The others hesitated, their courage draining as they saw their leader brought low. It was then that they sensed they had underestimated their opponent. This wasn't just an old farmer. He was a fortress standing firm against the tides of greed. Time slowed in that moment. Henry's breathing echoed loudly in his ears, a thunderous affirmation of victory that he could almost taste. The farmer had always known the risks of the business, but never had he faced anything like this. Each moment felt like an eternity as he gauged the remaining men, noting their shifting shadows. Then suddenly, the weight of their panic set in. One bandit turned on his heel, dashing toward the truck. "Get back in!" he yelled, the urgency in his voice ringing loud. The others quickly followed suit, scrambling away as if the very ground beneath them had turned to fire. Henry watched them flee, adrenaline still pulsing through his veins. A wave of triumph washed over him, chest heaving with every breath he took. He had stood his ground, warding off those who sought to take what was his. As the dust settled behind the retreating trucks, Henry felt a deep relief floating in the air as the morning sky turned a brilliant cerulean. The chaos of the confrontation potentially felt like a distant nightmare, yet the reality of it remained etched in his mind. But as he looked toward the horizon, the sun rising higher, illuminating the swaying fields, clarity washed over him. He understood now what had given him strength, not just the land beneath his feet, but the memories of what it represented. Generations of hard work and determination fueled his courage. With a deep breath, Henry leaned against the shovel, its sturdy frame warming in the sun while the raindrops that began to fall danced lightly on his skin. Each drop was a promise, a reminder that life would replenish and regenerate. Life would go on. After a few moments, the land breathed softly around him again. The birds resumed their morning songs, the gentle rustle of leaves filling the spaces left vacant by the scuffle. Henry turned toward the fields, surveying the crops that had become his lifeblood, an homage to resilience and tenacity. They had endured so many storms, so many droughts, and today they stood tall just like him. In that moment, he recognized the true essence of strength. It wasn't merely about physical power. It was about standing up for what was right, defending with unwavering courage, and drawing from the well of history that nurtured him. It was about the spirit of every farmer who had ever tilled the land, fought for their dreams, and stood firm against fear. The sun blazed overhead, warm and steady as Henry gripped the shovel once more, no longer as just a tool, but as a symbol of everything he would defend. He might have faced bandits that day, but he also carved a deeper understanding of his own heart, a heart as resilient as the fields that stretched before him, a heartbeat intertwined with the land he cherished. When challenges arose, when darkness threatened to cast a shadow, Henry knew he'd meet them with courage. Fear might tempt him to cower, but he would always rise, just as the sun always did after the darkest nights. As the rain began to fall in earnest, Henry closed his eyes, letting the droplets wash over him, renewing his spirit. He was no longer just a farmer. He was a guardian of hope, a torchbearer of legacy, and a testament to the enduring strength that resides within when one stands tall for what truly matters. The bandits had tried to intimidate him, but they had learned that true strength is not won or lost. It's forged in the fires of conviction and the battlefield of the heart. And in that battle, Henry had emerged not just as the victor, but as a symbol of resilience for every farmer who dared to fight back. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields of golden wheat as Henry leaned against the wooden fence, surveying his land. It was early evening, and the gentle rustle of the grain danced like whispers in the soft breeze. Everything seemed peaceful, but deep down, Henry felt a stirring unease, an instinctive warning pricking at the back of his mind. Just then, the quiet was shattered by the unmistakable roar of engines. 3 dusty trucks tore down the old dirt road towards the farm, a cloud of dust swirling high behind them. Henry's heart quickened as he squinted into the blinding sun, recognizing the reckless behavior of the approaching vehicles. They didn't belong here. The trucks skidded to a halt in front of the farmhouse with a splatter of gravel, and as the doors swung open, a group of 4 men emerged. They wore leather jackets and scowls etched deep into their faces, eyes scanning the landscape with the hungry glint of predators. Henry's stomach dropped, and the instinctual knot of fear turned into steel resolve. He pushed off the fence, standing tall as they approached. The leader called out, his voice dripping with mockery. He was a hulking figure, his arms crossed over his chest, muscles tensed as if ready for a fight. "We're here for a little chat." Henry crossed his arms, planting his feet firmly into the earth. "And what business do you have here?" The leader laughed, stepping closer, eyes narrowing. "We can make things simple. Hand over some cash and whatever you've got." The calmness of the afternoon cracked as a palpable tension filled the air. Just moments ago, the birds had been chirping merrily. Now, silence draped itself across the landscape like a heavy fog. Henry could feel sweat forming at his brow, but he drew on his years of farming, of standing tall against the elements and life's adversities. "Get off my property," Henry said slowly, his voice steady. The laughter from the bandits echoed, hollow and menacing. "What's a farmer like you gonna do? Hit us with that shovel?" The leader stepped in closer, his threats hanging thick in the air, but Henry didn't flinch. He felt the weight of generations behind him, the sweat of his father, the strength of his grandfather, men who had fought to carve their lives from this very land. The spirit of resilience rose within him. "I've faced worse than you," Henry declared, lifting his chin defiantly. "You think you can intimidate me?" The leader frowned for a heartbeat, surprise cracking his bravado, but it was quickly replaced with a sneer. "Okay, Pops, we'll make this easy for you. Just hand over your money and we'll leave you alone." Henry stepped forward, the tension snapping like a taut string. "I've worked too hard for what I have." In an instant, the bandits exchanged furtive glances, uncertainty rippling through their ranks. That was the moment they had underestimated him. They expected fear, but they had awakened something deeper: defiance. They were not just confronting a farmer, they were facing a man unwilling to back down. The leader's hand shifted, and before Henry could react, the man lunged forward. He yelled, the chaos erupting around them. Without thinking, Henry swung the shovel that had become a part of his very being. It connected with the leader's shoulder, a heavy crack echoing across the fields. The man reeled back, surprise washing over his face, pain cutting through his bravado. One of the other bandits shouted, hesitating briefly, uncertainty creeping into their eyes. But the fight was on now, like thunder rolling through the sky. Henry felt a rush of adrenaline surge through him, sharpening his senses. He ducked under a wild swing, pivoting like he had in countless wrestling matches with his brothers when they were children. He swung the shovel again, aiming at another bandit, catching the man in the knee. The bandit crumpled to the ground, howling in surprise. 2 bandits were now retreating, their bravado vanishing. Panic crept into their eyes as they sensed the shift in power. In their minds, they had thought they were facing an easy target, but the old farmer was standing his ground, fueled by years of hard work and an indomitable spirit. The leader, now panting and angry, motioned to his remaining comrades. "We need to go." But Henry wasn't done. "You think you can just come onto my land and try to impose your will?" He shouted, each word a battle cry against the darkness encroaching upon his life. As Henry swung again, bringing the shovel down with fierce anger, the sound of metal meeting flesh echoed through the air. The leader stumbled back again, clutching his side, doubt flooding his face. Henry could see the realization dawning on them, a realization that they had miscalculated everything. One bandit hesitated at the edge of the driveway, uncertainty overtaking the thrill of the chase. They weren't bandits anymore. They were desperate men realizing that true strength came not from numbers, but from the heart and conviction of a single man who had everything to lose. Henry commanded, swinging the shovel one last time toward the ground, the sound echoing as a final warning. The leader's face twisted in fear and anger, and as the remaining bandits turned tail and fled, Henry stood tall, chest heaving with adrenaline and pride. The storm clouds shifted in the sky above him, dark and heavy, but Henry felt the warmth of victory washing over him like the sun breaking through a haze. The bandits sped off in their trucks, dust swirling in their wake, leaving Henry alone in the quiet stillness of his fields. As the dust settled, a sense of disbelief washed over him. He'd faced them head-on, not just as a farmer, but as a man who had fought for his land, his family, and his legacy. The weight of years past surged within him, an echo of his history that fortified his spirit. He took a deep breath, letting the cool evening air fill his lungs, and for a moment he relished in the fact that he'd stood his ground. He surveyed his land, feeling the pulse of life all around him. Each plant, each grain of soil told the story of survival, of resilience. The shadows stretched longer with the sinking sun, but instead of fear, Henry felt a renewed sense of purpose. The encounter had not just been about the confrontation, it had unveiled a deeper understanding of his strength. He walked back towards the farmhouse, where the porch creaked softly underfoot, familiar and welcoming. As he sank into a chair and let the tension drain from his shoulders, he felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Gratitude for the land, for the memories, and for the realization that true strength doesn't just emerge in the face of danger. It's forged through every struggle he had ever faced. As the sky began to darken, a sharp breeze rustled the leaves, a reminder that life continued on, no matter the threats one might face. Henry had defended his territory, but more importantly, he had fought for something far greater than mere crops. He had defended the spirit of all those who had come before him, hard workers with dreams that sprouted from the earth. He thought back to those bandits and how they had underestimated the heart of a man who had known what it meant to toil under the sun, to cry into the soil, and to laugh in triumph after a hard day's work. They didn't just meet a farmer that day. They encountered generations of legacy, an unwavering lineage of strength that stretched beyond just one man. From that day forward, Henry felt a roar of pride each time he took to the fields. The belief that he could withstand anything solidified within him, cementing his identity not just as a farmer, but as a guardian of hope and resilience. So when the storm clouds gathered ominously in the distance, he stood firm. The wind might howl, the rain might pour, but like the crops he cultivated, he would always rise. For deep down in his heart, he carried the strength of 100 farmers who had come before him, their spirits guiding him through every challenge. And as night fell and stars twinkled in the vast sky above, Henry smiled, still standing tall on the threshold of his fields, knowing that he had not only defended his land, but had ignited a fire of courage that would never fade. No bandit could intimidate him. He had found his strength, and it was unbreakable. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields as Henry Johnson leaned against the wooden fence at the edge of his farm. The golden wheat swayed gently in the breeze, and a peaceful silence enveloped the land. But a sense of unease stirred in his gut, like a storm brewing on the horizon. And then it came, an ominous rumble that disrupted the serene afternoon. Henry squinted as dust clouds churned up in the distance. The sound of engines grew louder, more menacing, as two black trucks barreled down the dirt road towards his humble farmhouse. His heart raced as the reality of an unwanted confrontation loomed nearer. When the trucks skidded to a halt, the air crackled with a tense anticipation. 4 men spilled out, their faces obscured by the shadows of worn-out caps. One particularly burly figure stepped forward, exuding an air of confidence that felt dangerously threatening, like a wolf prowling into a sheepfold. He shouted, a crooked grin exposing yellowed teeth. "Nice place you've got here. Got a lot of crops." Henry's pulse quickened, but he refused to show fear. "This isn't a charity," he replied, his voice steady, a calm surface hiding the storm underneath. The bandits laughed, a sound void of humor resonating with threats. "Work? Who do you think you're talking to? We're here for what's ours." The leader stepped closer, invading Henry's space, the scent of sweat and arrogance mingling in the air. It's not yours." "It never will be," Henry declared, planting his feet firmly into the ground beneath him. He could feel the weight of the land pressing upon him, the generations that had come before him pushing him onward. The men glanced at each other, confusion flickering in their eyes. They weren't used to being challenged, especially not by an old farmer. The leader sneered, gesturing dismissively at the tool resting nearby. The laughter evaporated, replaced by a simmering tension. The bandits weren't expecting this, an old man pushing back against their intimidation. The air felt heavy, charged with both fear and anger. Henry felt a surge of courage rising within him, fueled by years of hard work and sacrifice. "Let's show him who he's messing with," the leader growled before lunging forward, fists raised. Time slowed as Henry reacted instinctively. He swung the shovel, connecting with the bandit's shoulder in a sharp crack that echoed through the fields. The man staggered back, wide-eyed and shocked at the unexpected attack. Shouted one of the other bandits, realizing that the farmer was not backing down. They rushed forward, but Henry wasn't finished yet. He ducked under a wild swing directed at his head, his body moving with a practiced agility honed from years of laboring on the land. With a fierce shout, he swung the shovel again, his muscles straining as it caught another bandit in the leg. A howl erupted as the man crumpled to the ground, clutching his knee in pain. Confusion rippled through the remaining bandits. They had come expecting an easy mark, but now they were faced with a tenacious defender unwilling to yield. The leader, shocked and angry, tried to rally his comrades. "What are you waiting for? He's just one guy." But doubt whispered through the group like a chill wind. Panic was creeping into their ranks as they realized they had underestimated the man whose life revolved around this very land. Henry shouted, his voice rising with authority that echoed across the fields. He felt the weight of the land beneath him, each grain of soil reminding him of the years of toil and hardship. It fueled his anger. These bandits didn't belong here. In a desperate attempt to regroup, the leader lunged again, but Henry was ready. He sidestepped, feeling the adrenaline coursing through his veins like wildfire. The bandit stumbled past and Henry seized the moment. He swung his shovel, catching the leader off guard and knocking him to the ground. Now the fear was palpable. The remaining bandits stood frozen, processing the fact that one man was pushing them back. They hadn't expected this kind of resistance. One of them finally yelled, the desperation in his voice ringing clear. The bandits turned to flee, scrambling back toward their trucks with frantic urgency. Henry stood tall, his chest rising and falling as he breathed heavily, pride washing over him. He had faced them down, not just as a farmer but as a man protecting his home. He felt vindication surge through him. He was not just warding off the threats to his crops but stood firm against the very idea of surrender. The trucks roared to life, tires spinning wildly as they tore down the dirt road, kicking up a cloud of dust that hung in the air like a ghost of fear. Henry watched them go, heart pounding, disbelief settling in neatly alongside triumph. They had come to intimidate him, but they had met a guardian. As the dust began to settle, a serene calm washed over the fields once more. The birds cautiously resumed their songs, the tranquility returning with a gentle sigh. Henry remained where he was, shovel still gripped tightly in his hands. Sweat dripped from his brow, mixing with the adrenaline that had just started to fade. He looked out over the vast expanse of his land, the crops dancing gently in the breeze, and he felt a swell of gratitude. He wasn't just a farmer, he was a protector, a guardian of all that was built upon this soil. Years of hidden strength erupted in that confrontation, a reminder that courage can shine in even the darkest of moments. Henry felt the pulse of the earth beneath him, the immense power contained within each inch of his farm. He had fought not just for his crops, but for every sacrifice made by families who came before him, laboring diligently to carve out lives from the ground. This land carried their legacy, and he would defend it fiercely. As twilight began to drape its cloak over the horizon, Henry leaned against his barn, the smell of wood and earth enveloping him. He thought of the day, of the confrontation that felt like a whirlwind, of the emotions surging through him in that chaos. There was a bond between man and land, one that couldn't be easily broken. Some might see him as just a farmer, a man who tilled the soil day after day. But today he had proved that he was something more, a fortress built from grit and determination. Each challenge he had faced had prepared him for this moment. Each bitter winter and every drought had forged him into a resilient force. As the night descended, twinkling stars began to emerge above, dotting the sky like promises of better tomorrows. In that stillness, Henry made a vow to himself and to the land he loved. No one would intimidate him again. He would stand firm, unyielding, bolstered by the legacy of those who came before him. The night air was cool against his skin. He could hear the soft rustle of the leaves, the whispering wind carrying away the remnants of the day's chaos. He felt liberated now, free from fear and filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Henry was no longer just a farmer. In that moment, he embraced the fullness of who he was, a guardian of hope and strength, resolute against the tides of adversity. No bandit, no fear, no storm could take that away from him. He would fight for his land, for his legacy, for every farmer who ever stood strong against the odds. The future felt bright, illuminated by the stars above. And Henry knew that with each passing day, he would rise to meet whatever challenge came next. He was ready, not just to defend his property, but to embody the spirit of resilience and tenacity that flowed through the veins of the earth. He breathed deeply, the scent of damp earth and growing crops filling his lungs. Strong roots lay beneath him, grounded and firm. The winds might shift, but he stood unwavering, a beacon of strength against whatever darkness dared to approach. Every farmer has their battles. Every day unfolds a new struggle. But Henry had faced his bandits and emerged not just victorious, but transformed. He would remain strong, an unbreakable spirit shaping the course of his land, bound to it by an eternal pact. And for that, he was grateful to be alive, to stand, to fight, and to continue to cultivate not just the soil, but the rich legacy of strength that defined him. The sun dipped low in the evening sky, painting the horizon in hues of crimson and gold. Henry stood at the edge of his sprawling farmland, taking in the sight of his hard work stretching out before him, fields bursting with ripe corn, the fruits of labor that filled his heart with pride. But in that moment of serenity, a distant noise disrupted the peace. The growl of engines grew closer, rumbling through the stillness like an approaching storm. A sense of dread settled in his stomach as he turned, squinting against the blaze of the setting sun. 3 dark trucks barreled down the dirt road, their tires kicking up clouds of dust that faded into the twilight. Henry's instincts kicked in, a primal warning echoing through the very marrow of his bones. Something wasn't right. The trucks screeched to a halt, gravel flying, and as the doors slammed open, 4 men emerged. They stepped into the fading light like wolves from the shadows, their leather jackets glinting ominously. The leader, a hulking man with a scar running down his cheek, strode toward Henry with a confident swagger, the kind that made the hair on the back of Henry's neck stand up. The man called, voice booming, "Nice place you've got." "Oh, not much." "Just to make sure everything here is in order," the leader sneered, glancing around at the fields that had offered Henry solace for years. "You see, we've heard you've got a nice little operation going here." "I'm not interested in whatever you're selling," Henry replied, taking a step back, not allowing fear to root him in place. "You misunderstand," the bandit said, stepping closer, crowding Henry's personal space. "We're not selling anything." Henry's hands tightened around the shovel he had been using moments before, its worn wooden handle familiar and reassuring against his palm. "You think you can just walk in here and take what isn't yours?" Behind him, the wind picked up, swirling the leaves and sending a shiver down his spine. The burly man chuckled darkly, shaking his head. "You think that shovel will protect you? You're just an old man." The laughter of the others rang out, clear and mocking, but with it came a flicker of doubt. Henry felt his heart pounding as he locked eyes with the leader. Years of labor, heartbreak, and determination surged through him like a raging river. He had worked this land through storms and droughts, and every ounce of that effort ignited a fire deep within him. "I've fought harder battles than you can imagine," he said, voice rising with conviction. The burly man's sneer faltered just a moment, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, but rage quickly reclaimed its dominion. "Let's see what you're made of, old man," he growled, signaling to his crew. In an instant, chaos erupted. The leader lunged toward him, fists clenched, but Henry moved. He swung the shovel with all the strength he could muster, its edge clanging against the man's shoulder with a sickening thud. The impact sent reverberations through Henry's arms, but he didn't hesitate. He followed through, spinning on his heels, ready for the next man charging at him. Echoed through the air, and the other bandits surged forward, their motions frantic, unsure. But Henry felt filled with a primal energy, a will to defend everything he had built against these intruders. The adrenaline surged. He dodged a fist aimed at his face and retaliated, using the shovel as a barrier. He swung low, catching one of the bandits at the knee, eliciting a howl of pain. For a moment, doubt flickered within the ranks of the attackers. They had expected a meek farmer, someone willing to cower, but Henry was defying them, striking back with the fury of a man pushed to his limits. Henry shouted, sweat beading on his brow, the fear churning inside him, transforming into fierce resolve. This was more than a fight. It was a testament to every hour he had spent farming, to the legacy he carried. The leader staggered back, clutching his shoulder, each breath heavy with disbelief. He shouted, uncertainty beginning to fracture his confidence. In that moment, the bandits faltered, reading the tension that hung thick in the air. The wind howled and the sky shifted ominously, sending a chill down Henry's spine as he pressed forward. The remaining bandits exchanged glances, fear creeping into their bravado. They hadn't expected a farmer to fight back, let alone with such tenacity. As they hesitated, the tide turned in Henry's favor. Suddenly, the leader roared with a mix of anger and panic. The command spilled out in desperation as the bandits turned to escape, scrambling toward the vehicles. But Henry wouldn't let them. He was done being intimidated, done being at the mercy of others. He shouted. With every ounce of strength, he swung the shovel again, this time connecting with the tailgate of one of the trucks, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The bandits froze, eyes wide with shock. Precious moments passed as they stood there, the weight of their decision apparent. What had started as a robbery devolved into sheer panic, their bravado melting away with each of Henry's movements. One of the bandits yelled as they scrambled back, throwing themselves into the cab, hands fumbling with keys. The engines roared to life a moment later, but the fear was evident in their eyes. They hadn't just lost a fight. They were fleeing a man they had grossly underestimated. Henry remained standing, the shovel poised in his hands, watching as the truck sped away, kicking up dust clouds that hung in the evening air. Relief washed over him, mingling with adrenaline, but it wasn't just victory he felt. It was a sense of reclamation. He had stood up for himself, fought back against the darkness that threatened to encroach upon his sacred space. The land was his, and he had fought fiercely for it more than just crops and soil. The very essence of his being poured into every inch of it. As the last remnants of dust settled, Henry leaned against the shovel, panting heavily. He could hear the gentle rustle of the leaves returning to their rhythm, the birds cautiously resuming their songs. But his heart pounded with the raw intensity of battle, and for a moment he felt invincible. Yet just as the dust settled, something caught his eye down the dirt road. In the distance, another vehicle appeared, moving toward his property with a speed that painted a picture of urgency. Henry's heart sank. Was this a new threat, or had the bandits returned? He stood tall, refusing to let dread take hold. In the dying light of day, he tightened his grip on the shovel, ready for whatever came next. The shadows lengthened around him, but he wouldn't back down. He anticipated a fight, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins, letting out the echoes of earlier confrontations that lingered in his heart. As the vehicle drew closer, its headlights piercing through the twilight, Henry knew that this was a defining moment. Either he would stand firm and face whatever threat came next, or he would let fear unravel the strength he had just found. With the truck still spinning away in his mind, Henry faced the road, heart racing, the tension palpable. And then, as the headlights came to a stop, his breath caught in his throat. The door swung open, and a figure stepped out, a figure he recognized all too well. The voice called out, a mixture of urgency and fear. And in that moment, he realized the night was only beginning.